Hello, my name is Heath Jones, and I'm the pastor of Northwood Christian Church. And if you'd like to learn more about us, you might check out our website at www.indYncc.org. That's www.indncc.org, and there you can learn more about our ministries, our location in Indianapolis, Indiana, and different ways that you might get involved. But for now, we're going to consider a passage found in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 1 through 9, and it goes. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Here is a story about a man who was stuck in a dire circumstance. 38 years ill, unable to walk, but then Jesus invites him into a life beyond his dire circumstance. But before I go on, I feel pressed to say, and please hear me from the onset, here is not a message that shames others for finding themselves stuck in situations that are outside of their control. No doubt the man in today's story had done all that he could do given the confines of his circumstances. And for 38 years, he had been stuck. Not his fault, probably nothing else he could do. But then, by the help and grace of God, by the help of something outside of himself, the man is offered a way out, presented with a way forward for the first time in probably a long time. All this to say, this is not a story that should shame hopeless people for being stuck in circumstances beyond their control. Rather, it's a story meant to encourage us all to take those first steps out in faith when new possibilities present themselves. And more on that in a moment. But first, a story. A couple of years ago, my daughter Josie went with me down the stairs into the basement, and she was about 6 years old at the time. And she often liked to accompany me down there. This wasn't the first time that we went down there, and she'd find any number of curiosities and old toys that had never been unpacked from our move many years before. But on this particular journey into the bowels of our house, something unexpected happened on the way back up the stairs from the basement. Something that had not happened in previous trips down there. So I went up first, expecting Josie to arrive at the top just behind me. But then I turned around and I saw my daughter frozen midway up, completely paralyzed by fear. You just picture her, hands gripping the sides of the railing, unable to move. I go up the stairs. So I said, "Come on, Josie, what are you waiting on?" And she said, "I can't." And she started whimpering. And I could tell she was on the verge of tears. This was not only surprising, but I was very confused. Why is she's done this, she's made this trip so many times before. And so, "Come on, Josie, this is silly. You've done this a million times before." And she tells me, "I'm telling you, I can't." And by now she was actually crying, tears streaming down her face. She was gripped by an irrational fear. So I asked her, "What are you afraid of?" And she replied, "I'm afraid that I'm going to fall down the cracks." You see, our stairs leading down to the basement are simply boards with cracks in between. And from her vantage point, being much shorter than I am, she was looking into what appeared to be large gaps through which she might slip. Or in her case, she thought she might just fall headlong through. But keep in mind, she would have had to belly crawl to fit between them. And even then, I'm not sure that she could have fit. But my point is, there was no way she was about to fall between the cracks. She was in no danger, and yet she was so afraid. So we stood engaged in stubborn dialogue for many more moments, and I implored her to overcome her fears. I knew she could do it, and she cried and cried, insisting that she couldn't move her legs one step further. I can't, she kept saying. Until finally I walked down the steps, and I took her by the hand, and I led her up the stairs. I said, "Here, I'll help you." I was willing to meet her halfway to give her the help she seemed to need. And she resisted with every step. Every step was an act of coaxing her. "Come on, you've got this, you've got this." And I did that, insisting that she do as much as she could do. And she insisted that I pick her up, but I knew she could make it. And I was determined that she'd shoulder as much of the responsibility as she could. She just needed to get up and to walk. And then we reached the top. And she was so mad at me. And then the strangest thing happened the next time we went down to the basement. She never brought it up. She simply went down the stairs and then back up the stairs to the first floor of our house with no guidance or help. She had what it takes. She had what it took the entire time. I think that it's important to help young people discover the power that they have to change the world, to affect change in the world, even if it's as simple as teaching them that they can go up the stairs. And that's what I was trying to do for Josie, because up until that point, up until those years when she's 5, 6, 7, before that, when she's 2, 3, and 4, I would do mostly everything for her. That's what parents do, everything for her. Even her work from preschool, it's far simpler to do her homework for her, or at least do most of it along with her, or to trace the letters ourselves, or to guide her hand in the tracing, or to cut out all the shapes she's supposed to cut out, because, it took so long for her to do it. And, at the age of 2 or 3, couldn't do a very good job. But at some point, it's good to encourage the little ones to take whatever initiative they can to help them discover for themselves the healing waters that are sometimes hard to find. Which brings me back to our text today. Our story happens in a place where it was believed that the waters heal. And those kind of beliefs were common in those days. Shrines and baths were often believed to have supernatural healing properties. And this one in particular brought healing when the waters moved. And when this happened, the sick would make a dash for the pool. Apparently, the first one in gets the prize, or in this case, receives the healing. And Jesus finds a man by this pool who's been sitting there for 38 years, as I keep bringing up, emphasizing the point, a long time. This has been his entire world, this life. And the text does not say what his affliction is, but we gather that it's serious enough to keep him from moving quickly to the healing waters when they stir. And one thing we can know for certain, his entire life was probably shaped around this situation, his dire circumstance. 38 years is a long time. It was the normal that he knew, and perhaps he felt little hope of that ever changing. But Jesus spoke to the man, saying, "Get up and walk." And I just got to say, some nerve Jesus has got. He'd better know something about that man's circumstances that man, in fact, doesn't. Otherwise, you shouldn't say things like that, "Get up and walk." Just seems like a way of speaking shame or judgment onto a man's circumstance. So maybe Jesus knows something else that we don't know. In fact, that's the case. But we're left with the impression that Jesus is offering some new path forward for the man. Otherwise, to say "get up and walk" would just be cruel. We come to understand that Jesus knows that this man is actually able to obey this command. Maybe he hasn't been able to before, but perhaps for the first time in 38 years, if he can only muster up the courage to believe it. But one would not blame the man if he had his doubts. If he, like my daughter on the stairs, could not believe the voice speaking into the situation, get up and walk. I personally have found myself trapped in life circumstances I couldn't see my way out of. And I bet you have too. As a pastor, I meet many people in circumstances that they feel stuck in. For example, I know a couple who is locked in a marriage that neither one is happy in, and year after year goes by, and now they've moved beyond anger and frustration to a phase where they are just simply trying to survive with one another. And there are others who I've met who are trapped in careers that force them into a life cycle of boring habit, clock in, clock out. And if you are not careful, this sort of life will deaden your soul day by day, shift by shift, and then year by year. There are many who wake up each day who say to themselves, if I can only make it through today. And when they make it, they wake up the next day with the same goal. And I'm sure that if you gave it some time, you could think of an area in your life that was once unbearable and made your life miserable. Maybe you're still stuck in that place. Or maybe you once were, but now you have lived with it for so long you no longer notice it. Is it there still? Perhaps it's a broken relationship, long lost, only now you've learned to live without that person. Perhaps it's a schedule so hectic that at first you wondered how you would make it, but now you've been traveling at hyper speed for so long that you don't know how to slow down, or you don't even remember what slowing down is like. And then there sits a man, 38 years immobile. Now that's slowed down, that's stuck. 38 years being stuck. 38 years of no answers. And some of us have other troubles that have caused us to feel in a similar way, stuck or trapped. Some of us have addictions, fears, insecurities, or health issues that we've battled for years. And many of us at one time or another have been able to relate to this man. And if that's you, listen. God wants to bust you out. But God's going to do it with you. Maybe it's time to stand up and walk. But we can't, can we? At least that is how it seems when you are in the middle of the mess. When you have for 38 years sat beside the same pool waiting for something, for anything to change. And sometimes there is nothing to do. What I mean is sometimes our situations really are outside of our control. Most of the times, probably that's true. I'm thinking here of the other invalids and paralyzed people surrounding the man in our story. Those others who were also sitting beside the waters waiting, and were still waiting after this man found his restoration to life. But this man specifically has been presented with a new opportunity, an avenue of escape, some new option that he could not have dreamt up. Jesus stands before him saying, "Do you want to be made well?" Here is a unique opportunity to take some first steps out of the dire situation, an opportunity that was not there before. Jesus then gives the man a choice. Many do not have very many good options, but sometimes new opportunities present themselves. And here is one such example, one such opportunity for this man. Or if you reflect on your own life, it will probably look different for you. As for that couple trapped in an unhappy marriage, perhaps it begins with the question, do you want to be made well? Answered with, honey, maybe we should try counseling. Or that person trapped in an unhappy work environment, the question may be, do you want to be made well? Is it possible for me to think of possibilities outside of this job? Or to the person trapped in a life of repetitive, mundane, bland, and unhappiness, the question may be, are the possibilities there for change? Consider it. Maybe it's true. Do you want to be made well? So what a question at the end. And the answer should be yes, please. But remember, if all you've ever known is 38 years of something, or a sickness, that can become a part of you, whatever that it is. And any change from that thing that has you stuck can be a scary thing to contemplate. I mean, who wouldn't want to be made well? And you'd think that the answer would always be yes each and every time, except not always. I spoke with a student at seminary once who's about to graduate and become a counselor, and she said that she had clients who are so used to the life patterns that make their lives miserable that the thought of change itself frightens them more than the sickness. And I spoke to my neighbors a few months back about a relative that they had who had been stuck in an abusive relationship. And every now and again, that person is beat badly. And her relatives will ask her, why doesn't she leave? And she replies, I don't know. I don't know. Same thing with another woman I met a few years back, been pushed out of a vehicle by her boyfriend. Just the latest example of years of abuse. She said to me, I just want my life back. Why do I keep staying with men like this? I just want to be loved. Translation, I just want to be made well. But with those people and with the man at this pool that we're reading about in today's story, and with myself sometimes, the question that dominates us is how? Yes, made well, but how? Sometimes it's easier to stay put if we don't see the how. I met a man a few months ago in the throes of alcohol withdrawal, and he said, I just want to be made well. The question remains, but how? And we cannot often, if ever, save ourselves. That's why we're stuck. So perhaps it would be better for me to say, we can very seldom save ourselves, but every now and again, a way forward presents itself. A father stands at the top of the stairs and says to his daughter, paralyzed by fear, here, take my hand, get up and walk. That's simple. That's simple. But then the question becomes, will we have the courage and faith to step out into uncharted waters ourselves when a way forward presents itself? So Jesus asks you and me and all of us, do you want to be made well? So think of your own circumstance. Do you want to be made well? Do you? And if you do, it's possible. It's possible. This will not be true of everyone I'm talking to here, so please, no shame to those who cannot do anything. But it's possible that the life that you've built around your circumstance is about to be changed, and in disorienting and frightening ways, but in good and life-giving ways. Grace finds us in unexpected moments, and perhaps this is one such moment for you. Or as the text reads, the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me. Jesus said to him, Stand up, take your mat and walk. And at once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Those of us hearing this might understand straight away what this means for us. It might mean that there is a power and strength in God great enough to bust us out of our circumstance. And maybe because this is true, or just entertaining the possibility that there's a way out, maybe that's all you need to find a little hope. Hope for our own healing, spiritually or physically, and hope for our future. But there is another point to this story that we all too often miss. It's Jesus that brings the healing, but he first asks the man to get up and walk. The man has just stated that he is incapable of getting to the pool, but he is not wholly incapable of trying to do as much as he is capable of. He is not capable of healing himself, but he is capable of doing his very best to fight against what has laid him low, even if there seems to be no point. Maybe you've met somebody like this who was going to fight to the end, whatever may befall. And Jesus, in this moment, in inviting him to get up of his own volition, calls him out of apathy and resignation to his bad situation. Jesus says, get up and walk. And I believe that Jesus is saying to us today, get up and walk. There is hope and healing in God, but we must first be willing to take a step out into the unknown. That is the journey of faith. So what might this look like? It might look like an addict getting help for their addiction. It might look like a husband and wife getting help for their relationship. It might look like someone who is fighting an illness, keeping their head up and drawing on inner strength from God to face whatever is next, healing or otherwise. I think it looks like a church like ours who is looking for a brighter future, that is willing to face change in all of its disorientation and all of its anxiety-inducing ways, but to face change and adaptation to better accomplish God's mission for us on earth here at Northwood. And I don't know what it will look like for you, but hear the call that shakes us from our apathy and sees possibilities for a future we could not imagine even moments before. So sisters and brothers, whoever you are, hear the words of Jesus. And if you are able, stand up, take your mat, and walk. And who knows where these next few steps taken in faith might lead us.